Hello, everyone. I'm Christian Roberts, Director of Education at the Dallas Opera. I'm here with my fabulous friend and co-host,
Quodicia Johnson, Education and Company Culture Manager for the Dallas Opera.
and of course, we're back for another episode of Taking the Stage with Christian
and Quo.
So we want to give a shout out, first of all, to everybody that's tuned in today. We thank you for tuning in. We want to give a shout out to TDO Network. Thank you for this platform as per usual. And Quo, let's talk about what we're going to get into today.
Yes. So, well, in addition to shout outs, I want to give a shout out to David. Always. Shout out, David. Hey, always. For today, our episode is titled Not a Trending Topic, because we are seeing that so much of our culture now in this nation goes on trends. We jump into or jump onto the bandwagon of what is important, what hurts, what needs to stop, and then within 2 or 3 months, we move on. And we are seeing that not even 2 months, not even a full 6 weeks maybe, the commitments, the recent fury to put out statements in solidarity to the Black communities, to communities of color, are suddenly starting to dwindle. They're starting to kind of take a back seat in the priorities of our organizations. To put it frank, people have moved on because now they are either bored or they are tired or they are no longer caught up in the frenzy of what is happening, which means that it is a concern, because that means that we have yet to fully understand the true nature of this work, as well as the importance and the priority that this work, social work, racial equity work, gender equity work, needs in our nation. So that is what we're talking about today.
And so just to that, I said this to a group not even a month ago. I said my life is not a trending topic. My Black life is not a trending topic. And unfortunately, in this nation, we treat important things, like the next shade of lipstick, that's hopping, or the next brand of jeans, that's the thing that's hopping, and that's the thing that's trending. Unfortunately, when it comes to life and rights to exist, you cannot treat them as a trending topic.
Right.
It's too important, and too many things are happening right now and continuing to happen after George Floyd, after Breonna Taylor, after Elijah McClain, after all of these people. I can't even name them all. And right. So we must not move on in a way that we have done before, as we're going, oh, that's last month's news, because it's still very real for many, many people. And there are people who still have not been held accountable for some of these things. And so we want to make sure that within our communities, within our organizations, within ourselves, with our own self-examination, that we are really and truly making sure that this is not something that is a passing fancy, if you will.
We want to make sure that we're avoiding that checkbox mentality that we love to kind of console ourselves with, if we will. Just, oh, I did that. I participated in that. I felt it. I cried and it hurt. And now let's move on. Instead of moving forward, there's this mentality of moving on. There is a difference. And so we're here to talk about that today.
Yes. Now, I want to say this too. I mean, we talked about some of the things that have been done. We've seen some steps that have been taken. We've seen statements put out. We've seen streets being painted. We're seeing removal of statues. We're seeing people do research and starting to read different books on this particular topic and finding out what they can do in their homes. We've seen people recognize Juneteenth and be educated about Juneteenth for the first time. And all that stuff is great. But what we have to be careful of is that does not end, it does not end there.
Right.
That these things that can come across as being performative gestures, if you're not taking the steps after that to right certain wrongs and to remedy these things.
Right.
And so we did an episode, a few weeks back called Keep That Same Energy. And the idea is that we have to keep the momentum going when we're dealing with a topic such as this, because for a lot of people, it's not just a topic. It's not just a trend. It is their life.
Right.
So this is the importance of it. And so the thing is that we have to be careful not to get complacent and satisfied with something like a statement or with a street painting or something like that. Or I've read the book or I've watched this video. This is the thing that we're going to talk about today, and the importance of making sure that you move beyond the statement, and that a plan happens and then action happens behind that plan. So, Quo, I know that we just talked about some of the steps that have been taken, things that we've seen organizations and individuals do in response to the injustice that we've been seeing. So I know I kind of blew through those things with Quo. Is there anything that you want to elaborate on within that that I did not get to?
Yes, I want to, and we've spoken about this before, make it clear that the things that have been done are not bad. They are not wrong. So taking the steps to create statements, taking the steps to do the research, taking the steps to hire someone into your organization to assist, to help guide the organization through proper equity work, not equality, not reform, proper equity work, not diversity and inclusion, because that's also different work, but having someone provide advice, those things are good. Removing the statues, having conversations about removing the statues, whether that is what the city chooses to do or not, those things are good. The danger comes in when those are the only steps, or when those are the steps that are taken to rectify the situation, when it is so much deeper than that. And so often I like to make sure that we understand that we don't really have time to stop and pat ourselves on the back for suddenly acknowledging an issue that's been in place and that has been shared, that has been documented, that has been researched, that has been in place in so many of our faces in our lives for centuries.
It's been lived. It's been lived.
Do we really have time to stop and pat ourselves on the back and say, oh, we're done with that? No, we don't. So wanting to be mindful that, yes, the things that have taken place thus far are wonderful first steps in a very, very long, lifelong, organization-long journey to help ensure that we have true and proper connection, to help ensure that we are not adhering to a fallacy of racial hierarchy and human values, and to ensure that we are not creating a hierarchy on the value of human life based on constructs that don't make sense, based on systems and practices that do not serve us. So all that to say, the street painting, the protests, global solidarity, all of that is wonderful. It's beautiful in its own way, and it came with its own weight for those of us who are having to live it. But we want to make sure that we continue in the work that is necessary, that we continue to find those solutions, because otherwise you're just perpetuating the harm. We spoke about that, and that either you are perpetuating that harm or you are actively trying to reduce the harm. You're actively trying to go through the process to help heal. And if we're choosing neutral, if we're choosing, oh, I can only conduct or dedicate so much of my time, a limited amount of energy to that, I'm tired now, or I don't want to talk about this anymore. If we are choosing our own comfort over the livelihoods, the lives of others, then that is an issue. If we're choosing priorities within our organization, we want to focus on budgets. Now it's time to focus on budgets. It's time to focus on these other things. As we get through a pandemic, understanding that if we don't address these issues now, we are simply just becoming more effective in perpetuating the system and supporting the system. So it is important. It should be a priority. It should continue to be a priority for the rest of your life. Welcome. It should continue to be a priority in its own way for the rest of your organization. It's not something that every single person will do. It's not the work that everyone has agreed to do in the same way, but we all have a way to contribute, just like we all have a way to contribute harm. So we want to make sure that as we're going through this process, that we're being honest about the effort that it takes, and we're being honest about the work that we're doing. And then we're looking at impact. We talk about that often. Your intentions are not more important than the impact of your actions, the impact of your words, the impact of your temporary actions, the impact of your temporary distress, if you will. There's a colleague in the field, shout out to Chip McNeil, in that I am not your summer project. And so we want to be mindful of what that means. Just as Christian said, my life is not a trending topic. What that means as we go through the process of truly acknowledging the humanity of others. Because this is what it comes down to. And if you can only go through the work to truly acknowledge the humanity of others for a month, for almost 2 months, that just further proves that there's some work to be done on all of us, with all of us, and with us doing it together. So that's what I wanted to add about, though that was long, but that's what I wanted to add about those things.
No, but it needs to be said. And like I said, you said it best. The steps are great. The symbolic gestures are great, but they don't get anything done. Painting a street doesn't get anything done. It is a powerful statement, but what happens after that? Having time for you to get acquainted with Juneteenth and what that means for the first time. That's great, but what happens after that? So we're talking about what happens from researching and learning to action, to planning and action. And so the reason why we bring this up is because all of those steps that have been taken can be seen as performative if you do not plan and then move.
Right.
Plan and then act on that. So it's very, very important. One of the things that Quo also talked about a little bit too is this sense of fatigue, this ally fatigue right now. And quite frankly, if you're tired after a month or 2 months, imagine what it's like to be tired your whole entire life having to live this. And so I ask that you also look at your humanity that way and look at your fellow human being and say, man, if they have had to deal with this their whole life, let me figure out how to suck it up and continue to move forward. And I don't mean that in a rude or a kind way. I just say, look, we need to look at ourselves. And that's why I said we need to look at this. I think this is a time of self-examination for all of us.
Yes.
And so, Quo mentioned about it's not about, your comfort level over somebody's life or their livelihoods. One of the things that I want to kind of tie into that is this conversation has been happening a long time, and it happens over and over and over again. We had the same conversation 5 or 6 years ago with the Trayvon Martin case. And you need to understand that this is history repeating itself 5 or 6 years later. And that particular cycle, this is the reason why we say you have to keep that energy, because that energy dwindled. Yes. And here we are again repeating that same history.
Yes.
So we need to really, really look at that. And Quo knows I'm a history nerd, and I like to look at where we've come from. But man, that wasn't even a full decade before we were having to say the same thing again and speak out against injustice again. And so the importance of planning and then action after doing these first steps, which are honorable, but the importance of following through with a plan of action and then moving, I cannot emphasize that enough, because otherwise, if it dwindles down again, in another 5 years, we'll be having this same conversation again.
Yep. And there's no reason.
No.
There truly, there is no reason. So we want to ensure that as we go through this process, that we are honest about the amount of energy it's going to take. It's going to take a lot of energy. It is going to take commitment, real commitment, when everyone else says we don't need to be talking about this anymore, or let's move on to another issue, or we have other issues to tackle. It's going to take true dedication when we look up into our organization, especially, we're always speaking to the arts, especially in the arts, yes. When we yes. are wanting to move on to the next issue, but yet again, we have those same artists telling the same stories of exclusion, of being dehumanized, of not having a place or feeling like they don't have a place. All these sudden epiphanies and awakenings that people have received or participated
Mm-hmm.
in the past couple of months. Again, those things have always been there. They've been there for a very long time. So we want to be mindful that we are truly putting in the work necessary to ensure that we do not come to this place again, not in the same way. It's going to take, again, lifelong commitment and work, but there is no reason for us to truly be back here the exact same way. And so we're wanting to be mindful of those things and the conversations that have been had and ways in which we can avoid having the same conversation the same way. A lot of that has
Yes.
to do with self, like Christian said, self-reflection. We have to do the internal work. This is the heart work. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard work and it's the heart's work, as we say so often. But then ensuring that we have people in place in our organizations that we are paying who are qualified in ways that will truly hold us accountable. Not because they went and got a certificate, which,
Yes.
not to knock that, but we want to be mindful of the worship of the written word. And not because they went through 6 months, a year, 2 years of training, or one class, or 45 minutes, or 1 hour, or whatever that means. Understanding that this takes continuous engagement, this takes internal work, this takes the understanding that we cannot simply just go to someone and put this off on someone else. Jerry Hawkins says so often, Jerry Hawkins of Dallas Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation, this is not a, oh, how can I help you? This is not a,
Yes.
oh, please, show me how to better help others in this situation. This is all of us in this together. And so until we all acknowledge it and embrace it as an issue that we are all facing together, we won't be able to find a solution. And I'm not sure how many people embrace issues with others and then choose not to pay attention to them. As a collective whole, that's
Yes.
rare. So we need to apply that same energy, and then we need to keep that same energy.
Absolutely. And that goes for your hiring practices when you're bringing people in to do this. Paul spoke to that a little bit. Hiring people and paying them a real wage to be able to do this, because this is heavy work and it's heavy lifting, and it's something that has plagued this country for centuries, and the arts are not exempt from this. We create beautiful things in the arts. We do. Oh, it's magnificent. I would not be sitting here if it wasn't. But we have problems just like the rest of society. If it's out in society, it's going to be in the opera house, it's going to be in the symphony hall, it's going to be in the museum. So we need to make sure that we understand that. And simply hiring a person of color to solve your problems or solve the problems without any support is irresponsible.
And
So
illogical.
it's illogical.
And inhumane. We want to be honest about that, because that's not the answer. Having somebody come in and say, oh, please tell us all the problems and then give us a quick guidebook on how to fix it. No, absolutely not. Because that is part of the issue. And that, again, everyone is not embracing it. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
hire someone who, again, is qualified, who is equipped, who has accepted this work, so that they can help guide and participate in that learning process and in that growth. But simply choosing someone just because they're a person of color, because you look up and you realize that you fired all your people of color, all of your Black, Indigenous people of color, because they were probably already overworked and underpaid to begin with, or you got rid of those positions once the pandemic started. That is a conversation that was happening once all the statements came out, because who's going to write the statement? Who's
That's
going to
it.
confirm the statement? Who is going to affirm the statement? Yeah. And so we want to be mindful of what that means. And then we want to be mindful that we are not putting the expectation to solve an entire organizational issue, a structural and institutional issue, on the people of color who do work there, who have not agreed to that. Simply going up to your coworker, your colleague of color, and asking them a bunch of questions? No. Reaching
Not
out
okay.
to ask questions who have not extended that invitation? No. And then when you do, be ready to pay, or be ready to have a real conversation and to pay, and what that means, because this is going to take true investment, true dedication. And it's not for the person who's been experiencing it all of their lives to have to come into this space where they work and they are expected to do other things, to shoulder all these things and then carry on, and now to suddenly carry your questions and your weight. And that's for everyone in all communities. We want to be mindful of what that means as we see brothers and sisters in other communities suffering. We want to be mindful of what that means for us to find our own education, but then understand we cannot simply rely just on our own education, and we have to reach out to those who are doing the work to guide those answers, to guide the work that we need to do ourselves and what we need to do as a community. So I always want to do that because I've seen so much weight go on to people who are still just trying to survive being in the organization, suddenly having to shoulder so many other things.
No, and I've heard a number of people talk about those things, and you know, it's quite frankly not fair because that's not what they're being paid for. If you have somebody in your organization that's hired to do a specific task, that's specifically in finance, specifically in development or something like that, and then you turn around and say, we need you to give us all the knowledge that you have about racism, and they're the only person of color. Yes, that's exhausting, and it's illogical, and it's unfair, and quite frankly, it's disrespectful. And so this may seem harsh to some people. It may come across as harsh, but it's the truth. And the thing is that we never want to come here again from the get-go of this show. We said we wanted this to be a healing, truthful space for creative solutions, creative collective solutions for that matter. And so what I think I want to talk on a little bit is how this is not just isolated to one type of organization or one facet of society. We see these things coming through in the arts. We see these issues coming through in philanthropy, in health, in education. And you know, education is my jam. We see it in sports. I mean, how many different corporations and stuff put out statements as well, you know, when we knew their history.
Right.
And so I can tell you now that there are corporations, and I won't name them, but there are corporations that put things out, and I look, and everybody knew, the entire world knew that it was a lie. Now, if you're planning to do better in the future, that's fantastic, but don't sit up here and act like you hadn't had problems before then.
Right.
Because we have receipts.
Right. We have receipts. Or the problem was not the organization, as Teresa Ruth Howard said in one of the Opera America conferences, as if it's the art. The art is some abstract thing that created these situations. Organizations are comprised of people. And
yes.
People adhere to the practices, to the culture to which they feel welcomed, or the culture and the practices they feel are normal, or the cultures and practices that we are taught are normal. And so it's important that as we saw these statements, and as some of us are like, okay, you took the time to say that for what? Or the statements are nice, not sure how many people feel better now about the statements. A bit over a month later, how many people still feel good about those statements? And how many people feel great that the organizations made the statements? Again, it's not to say that that was not a good step or that you have to scream it from the mountaintop, but being mindful that as we create policies, we need to ensure that we are being accountable. We need to make sure that we are keeping that same energy and that we do not default to treating this like a trending topic, so many other things that we've done before.
Or as Chip says, once again, we got to give a shout out to Chip McNeil, a summer project. Because the thing is, it is not a summer project. It is not something that is temporary. It's something that has been around. It is up to us, those of us who are alive right now, right here, right now, to do what we can to try to remedy that. But we cannot do that if there are not people willing to walk alongside each other together to do it. Cole has a phrase. She says, "Together we can heal," and that's what this kind of action is going to take. And I know we didn't want to run this show too long, so but I want to also make sure is, you know, Cole talks about calling people into the conversation and calling in people into the conversations to find solutions. And one of the things that when we were talking about doing this show, one of the things that I said I wanted to talk about was, you know, is there a line? And what I mean is at some point, we know something is going to roll out of the news. It always does, you know. So where's the line when it rolls out of our lives? Do we let it roll out with the news? So all of a sudden, since a topic is no longer in the news, we just, you know, kind of cool down because it's not in our faces anymore. Where's the line Where's that line where you decide that this is no longer a priority for you? Because if it trends like a trending topic, we know that can literally be overnight.
Mm-hmm.
This is a problem with a subject that's deep and with issues that run in the very fiber of this country and in many parts of the other world. But I know where I live right now, so I'm going to just speak to that. I will not speak for any other country.
Yeah.
And so I say that, I said, think about the line, your own personal line, and where and if it rolled away with the news. All of a sudden, the line was, well, the news is not talking about it anymore, so I guess it's over. Or if you've moved it a little bit to your line to be a little more comfortable, let me just push this over here a little bit so I can be more comfortable. Because I want you to understand there are some people who don't get the luxury of defining where their line is because they have to live it.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to breathe it every single day.
And
so
having
I would
to do it during a pandemic.
Yes.
Entire communities, entire native nations, sovereign nations who are having to deal with such horrible conditions, entire communities where people are passing, people are dying, people who look like us, people we know, friends,
Yes.
people who don't look like us, people we do not know. And so it's important that we're mindful of all these things as we are in this giant mix of a bunch of different circumstances, that we're being honest with ourselves, and then we're allowing others to be honest with us as well. And again, that we're not prioritizing our comfort over the livelihoods of someone else. I'm uncomfortable with that conversation, so I don't want to have it. Not, this is a dangerous conversation for me to have for triggering reasons or anything else. It's just, I'm uncomfortable and I don't normally talk about this, so I don't want to talk about it. That's something completely different. And so we want to be mindful of what that means when we are holding progress hostage because we're uncomfortable. And we don't get to do that. None of us get to hold progress hostage because we're uncomfortable. So
well, and it's not going to work now either, because the thing is that this pandemic is not going anywhere anytime soon, at least in this particular country. I hate to say that, I wish it would go. Some of us would like to start singing again. But I will say, sorry, I had to throw that in there. Look, I'm an administrator now, but I was a singer in a former life, and I have to say that. But I know I have plenty of singing friends who would like to get back to singing. But just like right now, when we're paused, honestly and truly, and we're sheltering in place. Well, some of us are still trying to do the right thing. What else are you doing? So what better time to reflect and figure out how to shore up your organization and make it more equitable and shore up your own well-being, and really looking at yourself saying, how have I contributed to this problem? How have I tried to help solve these problems? All of those things. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And the thing is, it has to happen collectively. Mm-hmm. Just like fighting this pandemic has to have a collective, united front that we know we need. Mm-hmm. We also have to have the same thing with racism.
Yes.
It has to be a collective effort.
Because just like the pandemic, we are all affected.
Absolutely. And some of us just don't know how much. But Poe and I talk all the time about racism robs you of so much. It literally robs you of your ability to connect with another human being.
Yes.
That is sad.
It is sad. It is sad.
Because human beings need connection. So I'm going to step off my Apple box, my soapbox now. Okay, preacher's daughter came out of me a little bit. But I will say this too. When we say self-examination and looking at your organization, Cole made a point. She said, consider your mission and your priorities. What are they? Define them.
Define them.
And is this a part of your mission and your priority? And I'm talking about personal missions. I'm talking about organizational missions.
It should be.
It should be. It should be a part of your daily business. Yes. The same energy you put into a budget, into programming, is the same energy you should put into this kind of work. Because it is that important, and now is the time to get it done.
And then, not to say that every single organization should go and change their mission to make sure that racial equity is an explicit goal of the mission, or explicit part of the mission, but in being honest about whether or not organizations are truly able to connect to others, if we are not making sure that we are doing our work through a lens of racial equity, through a lens of equity, period. Are you truly
Yes.
connecting? Are you truly serving? Is your art truly worth anything? Beautiful as it is, but I mean, does it really matter? So we want to be mindful of what that means. And then we want to be, again, we want to be honest about the work that this takes. This takes work. It is not just simply, I can hop into a session. I can do 6 months of
Yes.
training. I always say training. I can do 6 months of skills building and knowledge building and learning, and suddenly I am an expert, and I am equipped to go in and I can fight this entire thing. Just like it's not enough just to put out a statement that we are all going to tackle racism, and then a month later we're on to something else. As we're being honest about this work, we have to also be honest about the steps that are necessary for us to create true change. So that means that
Yes.
a lot of this is going to start, as Christian said, with self-reflection, but a lot of these first steps will be conversations. We have an issue in our country with actually addressing race, with identifying racism as part of the problem. So we have to start those conversations. So a lot of the first steps will be conversations. It's not enough to have 1, 2, 10 conversations, and then suddenly we want to create plans and we want to
Mhm.
create a way that we are going to go about doing the work, without making sure that we've had the appropriate conversations, that we've taken the appropriate time. We're not going to be able to just come up with a 5-point plan after 1 or
No.
2 conversations. So that is also something that is necessary in order for us to be honest with ourselves and to be honest with this work.
Absolutely. 100%.
And then, Christian, what I want to do is kind of go back. We spoke about, is there a line?
Yeah.
Part of that line, right? We have a line for ourselves and how committed we are to this work, whether or not we trend with the news and with the trending topics, but also the line between, I am going to show everybody what I am doing and I am going to tell everybody what I'm doing. And
Hmm.
everyone does not need to see the work that you're doing through you pronouncing it or announcing it, as long as the work is being done.
Yes.
While we had the statements and everything, that was great. And perhaps some people are quiet now, some organizations are quiet now because the work is being done. Other work is being done, and that's completely okay. So perhaps there is a line between, I am going to tell everybody about everything I'm doing, and I am going to focus on doing the work. Please make sure that we're focusing on doing the work. We can share our journeys, narratives, and sharing that narrative is important. So we can share our journeys as we go through this work and as we go through finding collective solutions to dismantle this thing, this ever
Hmm.
learning, lifelong journey that we're on. But we want to be mindful that simply displaying the things that we would like to do is not the same as bringing about true change. So it's
Yes.
important that we're mindful of those things and we understand the difference. That also plays into making sure that we're honest about the work that is necessary for this. Again, it's
Hmm.
not the, oh, I sat and I'm sad and I cried and I see the injustice, or other people are on the news, they're promoting racial equity, and then you're done. There is no done. We want to make sure that we continue into this work and that we continue to build this situation, that we build something that we have yet to see. That's something that we are having to do with the Dallas Truth Racial Healing and Transformation, to envision a world without racism. We have yet to see it in this country. Country was built on that system, on a system of race. So the fallacy of race. So we want to
Hmm.
be mindful of what that means and how much work it truly is going to take. It's going to take work. Let's be honest. And then let's get in there and get it done together.
Absolutely. And again, just to circle it back around to the arts, as we always do, we're not exempt. Our industry is not exempt. And so people, will often say, what does this have to do with opera? What does this have to do with the arts? And again, I say again, if it's out in society, it is on the stage, it is
Yes.
in the pit, it is in the dressing room, it is in the boardroom.
It's in the administration.
Because that's it. And the reason why is organizations are made of people.
People.
And people have flaws and hangups that we have to address. And unfortunately, this flaw and hangup is a 400-year-old problem in this nation, that we have to face, and we have to do some unlearning. and that's what it's going to take. And you know, I always say this, and it, you know, we sound like we're at a point right now where we would start to wrap things up, because that's normally what we would do once we, you know, talk about these things. But you know, Cora, I never want to end a show, because again, people will say this is daunting. You know, people are already tired after a month. You know, what are the positive notes?
Positive notes. And positive notes is that it is true. This is big. This is huge. This is something like no one in this country has ever truly seen before. This country is a location and a place, an ecosystem like nothing else in the world, to be honest.
It's an experiment.
In the ways in which we were founded, and in ways in which we grew on a global scale. And so we have to be honest about that. Positive notes are center truth. Know that that is the truth, that racism is real, it exists. Know that the truth is also that it prevents us from connecting with someone else. It prevents us from human connection. And then kind of take comfort, take heart in the fact that we want to connect. Everybody wants to connect. Even if personally you don't want to connect, that's something completely different. But overall, we're wanting to make sure that we connect with others. And so you are not alone in wanting to connect with others. It will take grace. As always, it takes grace for self. It takes grace for others. It takes courage to be in a situation where you, again, realize that you have created harm in some type of way, but then the strength and the love and the community that comes from making mistakes together, being honest about those mistakes, and then actively working to correct those issues and to heal the harm and to reduce the harm. So take heart in community, take heart in knowing again that you're not alone, and knowing that you don't have to be perfect. You have to start. And then you have to be honest that you will not be an expert. None of us are experts in this. So you have to start, and it starts one step at a time, one day at a time, one connection at a time, one narrative at a time, as we learn about others, as we break free from those stereotypes, from those false narratives that we've accepted about others, as we connect. Know that once you do start, it's contagious. You won't have to simply sustain that on willpower alone. It is contagious, and it will help sustain you and your willpower. You have to put that together. It will help and it will sustain you through this journey throughout the rest of our lives as we work to correct these things. For organizations, know that this is the best, this is the most logical, if you want to go with logic, this is the most logical approach into how we create art that serves communities, and how we create a co-creative environment so that others can also help us in creating that art, help us in sharing that art as far as organizations are concerned. And then knowing that as we have greater diversity in experiences, in lived experiences, in knowledge and approaches and imagination, that we become better organizations. So to simply fight it because you're uncomfortable does not give us the best shot. And we want to take the best shot, want to put our best foot forward. And then, as always, we want to make sure that we know that we don't have to do it alone, and that we're doing that together.
Well, folks, I think you've heard the positive notes and the call to action all at once. And just be bold. I say it all the time, be bold. Don't be afraid to think outside of the box. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And you might not hear the answer that you want to hear, but reflect on that answer.
You probably won't hear the answer you want to hear. And that's good, because that means that we can have a conversation.
Exactly. So, you know, be bold, ask questions, stand up when you see something that is not right, and then work to try to fix it. And that is the only way that we will get anywhere in anything, any problem that we face, particularly the one that it continues to plague us into the 21st century in this country. So, you know, with that, folks, you know, that wraps us up. Thank you all for joining us. Of course, as usual, if you have questions, please feel free to private message us. leave it in the comments. We are happy to take your questions and to answer them. You can also probably find us via email somewhere, but please feel free. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. You can always catch us through the Dallas Opera page as well. So without any more blabbing from me, let's wrap this thing up, and thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you next week. Peace.
See you later. Remember to keep that same energy.
Keep that same energy.